Hello, everybody. Well, a while ago, I received an email from somebody asking me how I coped with my borderline personality disorder, my cutting, and my social anxiety disorder when I need to go on stage and be a stand up comedian. And how did I start to involve my disabilities in my comedy? And instead of emailing him back, which I could have done, but I didn't, I decided to make a video out of it. Just because maybe I could help you with this video, and well, I just like to update you guys on what I have been doing, and this is just the good video to do so. So I started doing comedy, and I can say it pretty much saved my life until some extent. And that's not because I was suicidal once and I decided, well, I need to do stand-up comedy, but I was feeling so depressed, and I just really needed to find a way to give meaning to all the things that I have been through. And I have been going to stand up comedy shows before I was even a stand up comedian myself. And I just found that theater was the right way to cope with those feelings and just to let go. And I decided to use my disabilities and my mental illnesses in a comedy way when I first started, but that didn't exactly mean that I was particularly funny. No, to be honest, I was more like bad. And I think it was bad just because, I had some kind of ritual which kind of ruined it also for me. Um, but I used to be cutting myself before I went on stage. And because just to lower the anxiety. And the strange thing was, I cut it because I felt bad and I was so afraid that people wouldn't like my jokes or my jokes in general, or they didn't like me. And for that just to go down, I decided to cut myself. Not on stage, but just before I got on stage or at home if I didn't have a dressing room to do so. But um, in the beginning, I was, before I went on stage, I was like looking for a toilet, just to figure out if I could cut, and I would do so when I felt bad. But the thing was, I cut it and I didn't want it to be seen by any other, and so I hid it just like I normally would do. I would hit it, and with the hiding, um, it just happened that I got anxiety from, oh my god, I have to hide it, and I don't hope that anybody will see that I've cut. And with that, I just couldn't be funny because I was deathly terrified that people would notice that I had cut before I went on stage, and or at home, or that they would just see my cutting underneath my long sleeve, in which I would wear before I went on stage, just because I couldn't wear short sleeves back then. But it just kind of went on in a vicious circle. I just cut to release the tension, but it also became the tension because I was cutting before a show. And so that wasn't really a good thing. And in particular, the jokes about my self injury were pretty much like bad, and I was so deadly terrified that I would forget what I was about to say, or my jokes in general, that I would be like having a blackout when I was on stage. And yeah, it actually went on, and I found reason after reason to cut myself, but I figured that it just got in my way. I really wanted to be funny about my self injury, and I really wanted to be um, you know, I really wanted it to be um, funny about all my mental illnesses, and I just couldn't because that was kind of in my way. And when I didn't cut for 2 weeks, which was a milestone after all, I decided to wear short sleeves when I was on stage. Not for attention, but just for the sake of, well, I don't want to hide it anymore, and maybe it releases some of the pressure that I'm feeling when I need to go on stage. And my jokes weren't particularly funny yet, because I just felt it was too personal still. And when I decided to make jokes about my mental illnesses in general, like, well, you can see me sitting in a wheelchair, but I do have borderline personality disorder and manic depression, and I hear voices, 29 of them, and yada yada yada. I'm still gay, and I found out that just it just released the pressure on its natural, because I made it out in the open, and I also made not a big deal out of it, which resulted in, well, people can laugh about me. And the first set of jokes I used years ago, I was more focused on, okay, don't forget your lines, and don't talk about that, and don't talk about that. And I think it has saved my life in a way, but I think in beginning I used my comedy for the wrong reasons, because I saw it an outlet for the bullying and the anxiety and the cutting, and now I'm making my cutting as a part of a joke. I don't make jokes because I otherwise would self-injure, or that I would have a mood swing. I make jokes because I think it's funny, or I think it's good to talk about it, or to have an opinion on it. And I think that sort of changed. And with the self-injury out in the open, you could see people understand, hey, well, yeah, you're not an attention seeker, and you're just, yeah, well, it's not good, but it's not that crazy. And in that way, I use my self injury as a joke, but I make jokes about it just also to make it to be able to talk about it, and to make it plausible, to make it work for other people, so that they might come and see my show and think, well, yes, I can talk about it because she has talked about it. And people would have come up to me and said to me, well, thank you for doing this. And also with my borderline personality, people would say, yeah, well, you are a courageous chick. And I don't see it that way, but I think comedy has changed my life in that way, because I can do something great out of something really, really, really sucky. And I think I don't cut anymore now before I go on stage. I'm still looking for a healthier ritual, but when I was cutting so bad like I used to be, when I was starting stand-up comedy 4 or 5 years ago, I really thought that stand-up comedy was a let out, and it still is a let out, but it's a let out for the happy vibes, and for the I get a kick out of it just because I'm funny, and not because I'm self-injuring otherwise, or that I'm suicidal if I don't make jokes. That's the kind of thing that changed, but you also have to let the self-injury part go a little bit in order to come through that. I'm still finding a way to cope before I go on stage, but your question was, how do you cope? I'm not coping. I'm just letting my borderline personality disorder work for me. we work together and my voices work together. Not that the voices are that funny, but I learned that with instead of fighting against it, you need to work with it. And instead of ignoring the voices, which made me lose my text or my initial joke, I decided to tell people, well, I hear voices, and if I forget what I was about to say, it's their fault, but that in a funny way. And when I was starting, I was like so afraid to tell people what was going on with me, and I didn't want people to think that I was crazy. But in trying not to sound crazy, I sounded even more crazy. So I think I'm not coping, but I'm working with it. And just to answer your last question, my social anxiety isn't when I'm on stage. I do have several occasions where my social anxiety pops up really, really bad, but I don't have social anxiety when I go on stage. I do have it before I go on stage, but normal people have it as well when they go on stage, and that makes me feel a little less crazy. But I do have social anxiety in other occasions, like grocery shopping, shopping in general, the telephone, the eating, everything else besides the being on stage part. And I think, just to go back on where, how, and when did it save my life, I guess comedy has saved my life in a sense that I found a place where I just could be, and I still forget my lines, and I still forget sometimes, well, this is supposed to be fun, but I think and that's just not only when you are being on stage or in another profession. I think that when you decide to accept it or to stop fighting against it, it can develop into something you can use. So I think it's safe to say that when you start working and stop fighting, you get a happier person, and you still have to find your own outlet. But I think I have found mine, and I hope this answers your question. And if you do have another question, please tell me, comment below, and see you until the next video. Bye bye.